Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift into a softer past, not one of conquest or empire, but of scent and shade, of water and wind. A version of history where cities didn't rise in towers of glass and brick, but bloomed like gardens, quietly, patiently, lovingly. You step onto a ferry crossing the Bosphorus. A gentle breeze stirring the hem of your linen robe. The scent of roses floats by, mingled with salt and citrus peel. In this timeline, you are not a soldier, not a scholar, but something between. A kind observer in a world where Persian gardens became the blueprint for Europe's cities. You might not survive if this really happened, of course. You'd be a stranger in language, in custom, in hygiene. But for tonight, none of that matters. This version of the world is one you can simply walk through, unnoticed and unharmed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes follow a flock of birds arcing over the domes of Istanbul. But something is different. There are fewer smokestacks, and more trees. Cypress and myrtle rise in graceful rows, dividing neighborhoods not by walls, but by water channels. You notice that every quarter has a garden, not an afterthought, but a centerpiece. In this world, the old empires chose the language of water. When the Ottomans took Constantinople, they didn't just preserve Hagia Sophia, they surrounded it with gardens inspired by Isfahan. Persian architects were welcomed, not conquered. Their gift was not control, but balance. Shade in the heat, stillness in the noise. As the ferry glides into the city's ancient harbor, you pass under an aqueduct carved not with triumphal arches, but with arabesque cutouts, shapes of tulips and stars, throwing delicate patterns of sunlight onto the water below. A real historical fact, Persian gardens, known as Sahara Bagh, four-part gardens, followed strict design principles. Water was central, used to reflect, to cool, to irrigate. These gardens symbolized paradise on earth, a harmony of the elements and geometry. In this world, they became the standard not just for nobles, but for entire cities. You disembark, feet crunching softly on stone embedded with moss. The streets are hushed, even at midday, not because the city is quiet, but because the city breathes. Fountains gurgle at every corner. Arches hold vines. Vendors sell honeyed figs beneath canopies of mulberry and wisteria. There's a pause in your step as a child runs past you with a terracotta watering jug. She giggles, waving to a gardener perched on a tiled balcony. You follow the echo of her laughter down a narrow lane that opens, suddenly, impossibly, into a vast square. But it's not a square. It's a garden. The plaza is built on 4 quadrants, divided by flowing channels of water no deeper than a hand, and no wider than a shawl. The sound they make is soft and steady, like breathing. At the center stands a marble platform draped in vines. Above it, a lattice canopy filters sunlight into a gentle gold. You sit there for a moment. You don't speak. No one does. A poet nearby is reciting something in Turkish. But it is not for performance, it's for the roses. A quirky detail. In this timeline, every major building has a whisper dome nearby, a small stone kiosk where people recite poems to plants. Inspired by Persian belief that speaking kindly to a flower helps it bloom straighter. Some say it's superstition, others say it's acoustics. Either way, no one questions it. As you rise and walk on, a question takes root in your mind. What would Rome have looked like had it inherited this philosophy first? What if, instead of straight roads and square forums, the legacy of the West was the garden? Some historians still argue whether garden cities could ever have worked on a large scale. Too much water, one says. Too much space, says another. But in this world, the cities didn't grow over nature. They grew with it. And tonight, your path begins to wind westward. The wind rises again, carrying with it the scent of cardamom, hyacinth, and distant bells. You're not in a rush. Gardens don't hurry, neither do you. You are drifting again, westward through rolling green hills that once bore the footfall of legions. Now, these roads curve like rivers, following the landscape rather than taming it. Cypress trees line your path, as they did near Istanbul. But here they lean in with familiarity. as if they've grown used to watching travelers pass beneath them slowly. Reverently, Rome rises gradually, not as a sprawl of concrete, but like a terraced orchard. You notice it before you see it, the scent. Orange blossoms, neroli, laurel warmed in the afternoon sun. You step through the ancient Aurelian walls. Though in this version of time, they are more gardened ramparts than fortification, thick with rosemary, ivy, and bees. Rome, the eternal city, is still a marvel. But she is not paved in ambition here. She is draped in shade. Gone are the imperial forums choked in stone and politics. In their place, sunken gardens where basilicas open onto pergolas of jasmine and trumpet vine. You pass a former temple, now a public garden for philosophers and children. Their voices blend. A debate over the moon's shape collides with a child's song about a cat in the stars. A real historical fact. Ancient Rome did have gardens, hortus conclusus, and villa peristyles with fountains and sculptures, but they were private, luxurious, and hidden. In this alternate Rome, those ideas expanded. What was once elite became everyday. The hortus now belongs to the people. You sit beside an aqueduct that no longer brings water to a central bathhouse, but instead feeds into hundreds of tiny channels, nourishing fruit trees and cool groves. Doves coo overhead. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a lyre. The Colosseum is still here, but softened. Its upper tiers have collapsed into blooming terraces. Ivy fingers curl through the arches, and the arena floor is a field of thyme and wild grass. You can walk across it barefoot. And you do. A quirky detail. Gladiator schools in this Rome have become places where children practice storytelling and cooperative games. The old fighting pits are now used to train rescued birds to fly in choreographed formations above sunset concerts. You lean back on the warm stone and gaze up at the soft Roman sky. It's hard to imagine blood ever spilled here. The ghosts don't linger, or if they do, they are finally resting. As the light shifts, a quiet debate plays out at a nearby terrace cafe. Two historians, both in linen tunics dyed with walnut ink, sip chilled herbal wine and argue over the Great Garden Reforms of 1262, a year when the Senate outlawed wide paved boulevards in favor of flowering canals. One claims it saved Rome's soul. The other says it nearly drowned the theater district. Some historians still argue whether an urban model built on gardens could support growth. Commerce needs clarity, they say. Grids, markets, streets with numbers. But here, commerce comes with olives, and couriers ride barge boats trimmed with mint. You cross a footbridge shaded by grapevines, watching a boy lower a basket of figs from a rooftop down to a passing boatman. A small act, but one that says, the vertical and the horizontal live gently together here. Remember the whisper domes from Istanbul? In Rome, they've taken root too, but with a twist. You pass one near the Tiber River, where elderly women speak prayers to their departed under lemon trees. Some believe the river remembers. You take the long way to your lodging, an old villa once owned by a minor senator, now repurposed as a rest house for garden architects and traveling musicians. Your room overlooks a spiral of plum trees. The light through the shutters is dappled, like candlelight filtered through lace. A gentle thought crosses your mind. What if this had been the model that traveled north into Gaul? Into Britain? Into the frostbitten cities of the future? Would London be lavender-scented? Would Berlin hum with bee gardens? You sleep lightly that night, rocked by the slow drip of a courtyard fountain outside your window. The marble beneath your mat is cool. A breeze plays at the corners of your blanket. And when you dream, it's of water that never floods, and gardens that never end. You awaken on the road again, carried north on a canal barge as gentle morning mist settles over the waters. The sky above France is pale and inviting. The clouds arranged like careful brushstrokes, as if someone had painted the weather just for you. The boat glides quietly, no engine hum, no shouts, only the sound of slow ripples and the soft creak of willow branches brushing the surface. You're entering Paris not by road or rail, but by water. This version of the city was shaped centuries ago by a different vision. Not Haussmann's bold, straight avenues, but a Persian-inspired lattice of green arteries, canals edged with fruiting vines, narrow footbridges arched like ivy stems, streets designed to meander and refresh. Paris breathes here, not with haste, but with hush. You pass under a trellis of flowering almonds. A gondolier nods from another canal. Her boat loaded with baskets of lavender and apricots. The air smells sweet, not from perfume, but from real things: orange zest, wet moss, clover from the floating herb gardens tethered along the quay. A real historical fact: in the late 17th century, Louis XIV commissioned the Canal de l'Ourcq to bring water into Paris. In this world, however, such efforts began centuries earlier, under the influence of translated Persian texts advocating for water as a shaping force of civic life, not just utility. The result: a city of quiet currents and floral corridors. You disembark at a landing nestled beside the Louvre, not a fortress here, but a gardened observatory. Its glass roof glints in the sun, and beneath it scholars debate time, light, and shade. You're greeted not by guards but by gardeners, their hands stained with saffron and beetroot dye. A quirky detail: the roses in this version of Paris have been crossbred with rare desert species, resulting in petals that shimmer faintly in fog. Locals say if you lean close at dawn, you can hear them sigh. You make your way along the Rue des Lys, a narrow path once known for revolution, now reborn as a lane of quiet pavilions and open-air classrooms. Children paint cloud studies on rice paper. Musicians rehearse under wisteria-covered eaves. A man in a teal robe stops to let you taste a fig still warm from the sun. The Seine has not disappeared, but it has multiplied. Tributaries now thread through arrondissements like lifelines. The Ile de la Cité feels less like a fortress and more like a petal afloat in a wide blue bloom. You cross a bridge etched with poems in Farsi and Old French, left there by migrating poets who came centuries ago. There is an ongoing debate here, hushed but constant, among scholars and city planners. Some believe the water gardens have made Paris too soft, too slow. They argue for stone, for permanence. Others defend the gardens fiercely, citing the lowered summer temperatures, the rise in communal gatherings, the near elimination of public violence. Some historians still argue whether cities can truly thrive without fortification, emotional or architectural. But here, Paris does not protect itself from its people. It opens. In the Jardin des Reflets, a mirrored botanical park just beyond the Latin Quarter, you sit among students and elders alike. A woman with eyes like old paper tells you she still dreams of Isfahan, though she's never been. "I think we borrowed something sacred," she says softly, "and it has repaid us in shade." You remember her words as you visit a sunken plaza where once there had been barricades. Now, a central fountain mimics a desert spring, and the paving stones have been replaced by mosaic depictions of constellations. Children play there, tracing planetary paths with pebbles. The Louvre's inner court contains a replica of an ancient Persian water clock, rebuilt with both Parisian gears and motifs drawn from Andalusian design. You and a young watchmaker spend an hour debating whether its tick is too patient or just right. She finally laughs and says, "Perhaps time behaves differently around water." You think about that as you watch the moon rise, reflected in a still pool beside Notre Dame. You do not climb the bell tower. Instead, you find a bench half swallowed by rosebushes and rest your head. The bells sound gentle in this version of the world, less a command, more a lullaby. And though the stars are the same, something about their placement feels softer now, as if the heavens, too, had leaned a little closer to the ground. By morning, you're southward bound again, following the warm pull of sunlight across the Pyrenees, through olive groves and citrus orchards, until the land settles into Andalusia's golden rhythm. The air here smells of warm stone, rosemary, and sun-drenched clay. Birds sing like flutes. Even the soil seems to glow. You arrive in Córdoba under a sky so blue it seems hollowed from lapis. The city welcomes you not with fanfare, but with fragrance, orange blossoms drifting from courtyard groves, and the distant trace of sandalwood smoke curling from rooftop burners. Cobbled streets give way to tiled corridors, and everywhere you go, water murmurs. You cross beneath a horseshoe arch trimmed in cobalt and pearl. Beyond it lies the city's heart, not the mezquita turned cathedral, but the Jardin de las Escuchas, the Garden of Listenings. It's a curious place, where tile mosaics aren't just decoration, but recorders of sound. You step lightly, and the echoes whisper back in soft tones. A real historical fact: The Caliphate of Córdoba in the 10th century was a center of learning and architecture. Home to one of the world's largest libraries. In this alternate strand of time, the city's scholars collaborated more deeply with Persian garden engineers and acoustic theorists, embedding resonance chambers in ceramic walkways and stone walls. A young archivist leads you through an open-air scriptorium, ink wells set beneath trellises of grapevine and silk. You run your fingers across a cooled slab of glazed tile, only to hear a faint verse of poetry recited back, stored in vibrations. She smiles. They say the floor remembers conversations long after the speakers are gone. A quirky detail. Some older neighborhoods have whisper tiles embedded at street corners, designed to pick up and rebroadcast lullabies once sung to babies. You walk past one and catch a melody in an unknown dialect, so delicate it sounds like wind rustling through paper. You're invited to a scholars' gathering beneath a pavilion made of carved teak and emerald-stained glass. The group is eclectic: an astronomer who maps moonlight through fountains, a botanist who claims certain vines hum under moonrise, and a child prodigy who believes birdsong contains forgotten equations. Tonight's debate swirls around naming. Should imported flowers keep their Persian names? One scholar asks. Or do we give them Andalusian ones, rooted in this soil? Another chimes in. What if the stars are the same, but our stories are what give them shape? Some historians still argue whether cultural fusion dilutes or deepens tradition. You watch the debate unfold not like a contest, but a garden, tangled, lively, and rooted in care. As the evening cools, the group drifts toward a long reflecting pool that doubles as a celestial observatory. Small ceramic lenses, set into the tiles, bend starlight into swirling patterns on the water's surface. One of the older scholars claims he once saw Venus blink. Not a flare, he insists. A blink, like it was watching us. You lie back beside the pool, breathing in the scent of moss and stone. The soundscape around you is alive, not noisy, but textured. A dove coos from somewhere high. The fountain trickles. The tiles beneath you carry memory like paper carries ink. And then you hear it, so faint you might be dreaming. A voice from the mosaic near your elbow, reciting the same verse you heard earlier. We are but echoes of gardens once drawn in sand. The stars overhead do not shimmer. They resonate. The train of time carries you north once more, through sunflower fields and rolling valleys, into the mist-draped plains of the Po River basin. Venice appears not like a city, but like a mirage, floating, flickering, held aloft by light and legend. But in this version of the world, it floats on more than saltwater. It floats on borrowed wisdom. As your boat glides into the Grand Canal, you immediately sense the difference. Instead of stone facades pressed tightly to the water's edge, terraced gardens descend in steps. Hedges curve in crescents. Canals weave not only for transport, but for cooling and reflection, mirroring Persian Sahara bog layouts adapted to this aquatic terrain. Real historical fact: the Republic of Venice maintained extensive trade with the Islamic world for centuries, including Persia. While artistic exchanges are well documented, garden philosophy was less directly adopted until now. In this alternate strand, Persian refugees, architects, and horticulturists were welcomed in greater numbers during the late 13th century. They didn't rebuild Venice, they recomposed it. You step off the boat near the Rialto, where market stalls now back onto water-fed planters of fig and citron. Flowering vines climb wooden trellises anchored into bridges. And on a terrace above the old silk exchange, a man in teal robes trims a pomegranate tree into a perfect spiral. Geometry keeps us cool, he explains, offering you a slice. Air moves more freely when guided with respect. A quirky detail: many canal homes here contain wind doors, small hinged shutters cut into the upper portions of arches, allowing precise breeze control. From a distance, the entire city seems to breathe. You're led through a narrow alley and into a cloister garden open to scholars and artists. A Venetian woman with ink-stained fingers is painting a map of canal flow using pigments derived from saffron and crushed lapis. We used to fear the flood, she says. Now we fold it into the rhythm of our days. A group of musicians rehearse nearby, their instruments slightly out of tune. Not from carelessness, but because their conductor is experimenting with Persian tuning systems, aligning chords with seasonal tides. Minor keys for winter, he murmurs. Major ones for spring. Tonight's debate centers on symmetry. Is reflection more truthful than reality? A poet asks. Or merely more beautiful? An elder architect counters. In gardens, reflection is structure. It reveals the intention behind chaos. Some historians still argue whether Venice's strength was its adaptability or its rigidity. But here, amid roses and rippling water, the answer seems clear. Survival comes from softness, not stone. As dusk falls, you're guided to a small rooftop sanctuary, open to the sea. Shaded by draped cloth and flowering jasmine. In its center stands a sundial with hour lines that twist into an infinity shape. Time, someone whispers behind you, is more of a tide than a march. You lie back against warm wood and silk pillows. The scent of basil and brine in the air. Gondolas murmur below like lullabies. High above, the first stars blink into being, reflected in the waters of Venice, in the ponds of Persia, in the tiles of Cordoba. And all at once, it feels like the world is stitched together by light and leaves and the quiet rush of water returning to its source. Morning arrives gently. You wake to the soft lapping of water against stone, and the scent of rosemary warmed by sunrise. The rooftop garden hums with early light, vines glittering with dew. Shadows long and quiet. Down below, vendors are setting up their carts. And for a moment, the sounds of Venetian trade mingle with birdsong and the flutter of silken awnings. Your guide today is not a merchant, nor a scholar, but a gardener. He is old, though not in his hands, those remain precise. Steady, green-stained, he wears a russet tunic belted with rope, and sandals dusted with crushed petals. Come, he says, it is planting day for the autumn quadrant. You blink. The what? He gestures to a garden plot shaped like a perfect quarter circle. Aligned to the western wall. We do not mark seasons with stars alone, he says, we plant them. Real historical fact. In Persian garden tradition, space was often divided to reflect the four elements or the four seasons: water, fire, earth, air, and used for both ritual and agriculture. Gardens were practical timekeepers. This tradition, imported into Italy, has evolved. Here, in the quieter pockets of Venice, some neighborhoods mark the year not with clocks, but with what's blooming, what's harvested, what's being pruned. Children recite seasons like poetry, where the quince sets root. It is summer where the rosemary blooms. It is fall. You spend the day assisting in one such quadrant, removing old marigold stalks, raking mint roots, pressing saffron bulbs into the cool soil. It's soothing work, rhythmic. You lose track of time. Your hands warm, your back grateful. The sun drifts through thin clouds like tea through rice paper. A quirky detail. Each quadrant is fertilized not with animal manure but with compost from old letters, parchment ground to pulp. Ink faded into soil. Ideas become nourishment, says the gardener with a wink. Even bad poems help the roses. At midday, the local cook arrives with baskets. She takes sprigs of lavender, a pomegranate or two, and something called sun fennel, a hybrid plant bred for its golden leaves. In her notebook, you glimpse a recipe annotated with both moon phases and water levels. Cooking is also a kind of astronomy, she says simply. That evening, the community gathers in the garden. Low tables are spread with figs, almonds, goat cheese, and honeyed bread. The air glows with oil lamps and soft conversation. You notice how people here glance at the plants before speaking, as if seeking seasonal approval. Tonight's discussion flows slowly. What does it mean to live in rhythm? Has our obsession with mechanical clocks made us forget how to listen to the ground beneath us? One young scholar speaks softly. Maybe gardens were the first calendars. Maybe we once knew time as something edible. Some historians argue that mechanical timekeeping was inevitable, that the garden, while beautiful, was too inconsistent for progress. But others insist it was the garden's very inconsistency that kept people humble, reminding them that time, like weather, does not bend to will. Later, beneath grapevines knotted like constellations, a child climbs into your lap holding a wooden dial etched with the phases of the moon. This one points to when the wind changes. She whispers, eyes wide. You don't ask how she knows. You simply believe her. As the stars begin to pulse faintly above, you wonder, what if every building in the world came with a garden like this, not for decoration, But for orientation, a compass of herbs and shadows, reminding us when to rest, when to reach, and when to simply sit still. And as night enfolds the vines and voices and velvet air, you find yourself doing just that. Sitting still, letting the garden keep time. You're walking now, under Florence, or rather, under what Florence has become. The passage is narrow and cool, cut deep into stone, echoing with the hush of distant water. A lantern swings from your guide's hand, casting flickering reflections on the damp walls. The ceiling is arched, reinforced by columns etched with stylized vines. It smells faintly of clay and moss, with an occasional sharpness of lime and old copper. This isn't just a sewer or aqueduct. This is infrastructure reborn, built on Persian principles, your guide says, tapping the stone with a wooden pointer. Not just for water, but for harmony. Real historical fact. Persian conduits were sophisticated underground channels that transported water using gravity alone. Often across great distances and through harsh climates. They were marvels of silent engineering, designed to last centuries. In this timeline, Florence adopted and expanded these ideas after trade with Persian engineers intensified in the early Renaissance. What you walk through now is a canal aqueduct hybrid, designed not only to deliver water to fountains and gardens, but to regulate humidity, prevent fires, and cool certain chambers above during summer. You pass beneath a perfumery. Above, dried flowers steep in spring water flowing directly from the aqueduct, creating subtle aromatics that drift through air vents into the streets. The city itself becomes perfumed. Another turn leads to a public bathhouse. Warm air filters down from sunlit glass bricks far above, mixed with steam from heated channels. One room is reserved for what they call astrobaths, mineral infusions aligned with lunar phases. It's hard not to smile. Even hygiene here is written in starlight. A quirky detail. Embedded along the walls are small ceramic faces with open mouths. Water trickles from their lips. Your guide explains these are called susurranti, the whispering ones. If you press your ear close, the shape of the tunnels warps the flow of water into melodic hums. Some say you can hear prayers hidden in the sound. You pause at a domed chamber, where 4 streams converge into a circular pool. Light seeps in from an oculus far above. This, your guide tells you, is the House of Balance, a place where engineers test pressure, temperature, and purity, using handmade instruments built from brass, paper, and bone. On the far wall is a faded fresco of a lion drinking beside a peacock. Water belongs to no nation, your guide says softly, only to the thirsty. You sit by the edge and let your fingers trail the surface. It's cool, smooth, alive with flow. The quiet here isn't empty, it's listening. Some historians argue that European cities never truly embraced hydraulic wisdom from the East, preferring fountains for beauty over function. But here, in this version of Florence, water is both art and utility. Beauty flows in every pipe. You emerge at last from a hidden staircase behind an apothecary. Above ground, the city hums with late afternoon light. People fill their jugs from lion-mouthed spouts. Children chase each other along rivulets that wind between cobblestones. In a shaded courtyard, a man with chalk and string diagrams new improvements to the aqueduct's northern branch. His apprentice adds sketches of koi fish, to help us see the water better. He says, you realize that in a city shaped by gardens and guided by stars, even plumbing becomes poetry. And as you take one last look down the grated vent behind you, the water glinting like a ribbon of starlight below, you think, maybe it's not about where water comes from, but where it lets us go. Hey guys, tonight we wander into a quiet corner of Padua, where mathematics smells like roses and silence hums with reason. This is the pavilion of fragrant geometry, a place that shouldn't exist. And yet, in this alternate world, does. Tucked inside a university courtyard rimmed with low cypress trees and sandstone archways. The pavilion is neither mosque nor church, neither observatory nor oratory. It's simply possibility. Built in stone, you arrive just as the sun dips low, spilling gold across the pavilion's roof tiles glazed in soft blue. A mosaic above the door shows 2 figures kneeling on opposite sides of a blooming flower, one in Persian robes, the other in Italian scholar's dress, both reaching toward the same star. Inside, the first thing you notice is scent. Real historical fact, In Persian garden design, certain flowering plants were arranged not just for beauty, but for their aromatic effects, timed to bloom with the seasons. Even with specific hours of the day, some scholars of the Islamic Golden Age believed fragrance could aid concentration and even unlock memory. Here, those ideas have taken root in academic architecture. You step into a room shaped like an 8-petaled rosette. Each alcove contains a different plant: jasmine for clarity, rosemary for recall, mint for balance. Scholars sit on silk cushions, noses occasionally dipping towards small ceramic scent bowls, pens gliding over parchment. One student, eyes closed, whispers through a theorem with the rhythm of poetry. Your guide hands you a slip of paper soaked in orange blossom. Take this when you get tired, they say. It clears the fog. There's no lectern, no chalkboard. Instead, the center of the room holds a bronze armillary sphere flanked by hourglass-shaped incense burners. The scent is delicate, not distracting, just enough to make the mind stretch without strain. A quirky detail: one alcove is labeled, "The Garden of Errors." Students come here to write down their mistakes, flawed equations, half-true conclusions, misreadings. A gentle breeze filters in through a high screen, scattering these pages across the floor like petals. No one judges them. They are compost for future thought. Some historians argue that scent, sound, and space are too subjective to be tools of science. That reason should be cold, clean, dispassionate. But here, you see minds opening like flowers in sunlight, not in spite of the atmosphere, but because of it. You sit beneath a window shaped like a 5-pointed star. Outside, grapevines climb a wooden trellis. Distant bells chime the hour. A scholar beside you draws geometric proofs while humming a lullaby in Farsi. You recognize one of the shapes on her page, a pattern you saw etched into tilework back in Samarkand. It's the breath of God, she says, without looking up, and the whisper of logic. You reply, surprising yourself. She smiles. The debate tonight is on the metaphysics of proportion, whether beauty has an equation, or if symmetry is just our way of coping with chaos. Arguments rise and fall like tides, respectful and calm. As the sky darkens, oil lamps are lit with mirrored dishes to amplify their glow. Shadows flicker across the patterned walls. Someone plays a low note on a reed flute. Others sip from cups of fig leaf tea, warm and green. You feel no urgency to leave, only a soft expansion, like your mind is breathing. And as the stars emerge above the domed ceiling, their light caught in glass and geometry, you realize some truths are not shouted, some are grown. The morning finds you in Toledo. Not the Toledo you might remember from textbooks, all swords and steel, but a gentler version, one where knowledge trickles like water through marble courtyards and tiled fountains. You step into the city beneath lavender light, your sandals clicking against worn stone paths as a breeze carries the scent of almond blossoms and iron-rich dust. Here in this alternate world, Toledo remains a thriving translation capital, not just of texts, but of textures. Arabic, Latin, Hebrew, and now Persian calligraphy swirled together on shop signs, university walls, and yes, even water basins. Your destination is a garden once attached to a madrasa, now repurposed as a public research court. It's quiet, but not still. In the center stands a large octagonal fountain, its water dancing in precise, rhythmic arcs. Along its edge are carved sundials, zodiac markers, and tiny copper inlays etched with planetary positions. Real historical fact: water clocks and hydraulic automata were studied extensively during the Islamic Golden Age. Engineers like Al-Jazari crafted fountains that shifted flow on the hour, poured from animal-shaped spouts, or rang bells in sequence. Here, those designs evolved into a kind of living calendar. As you watch, the fountain tilts subtly, its jets adjusting to track the sun's position. A scholar walks by with a brass astrolabe tucked under one arm and a folded paper sundial in the other. You exchange greetings. He invites you to sit. The bench is warm from morning light. Beneath it, you hear faint clicks, the inner workings of a hidden mechanism. The entire garden is timed. At mid-morning, a flute of water rises and sprays through a copper rosebud. At noon, a rotating mirror briefly blinds the center spout, marking the solar zenith. A quirky detail: in one corner of the garden, a group of children play a game with floating leaves. trying to predict which outlet the current will pull them toward. A small plaque reads, "Let the river teach you probability." You're led to a shade pavilion where scrolls are laid out on polished walnut boards. One is a map of irrigation systems, patterned after Persian gardens, but this one overlays lunar calendars and star alignments onto farmland. "We don't just water crops," the scholar says softly. "We water time." You think back to Korea's Cheongsong Yolcha Banyajido, to Venetian clock towers, to Ottoman hybrid sundials. They weren't just keeping time. They were giving it rhythm, form, breath. Some historians debate whether mechanical timekeeping diluted cultural understandings of natural cycles. Whether sundials were more poetic than accurate, or if poetry and accuracy ever needed to be separate things. Here, the fountain answers for you. At dusk, when the western wall glows with orange and violet, the jets slow, the arcs lower, the last spray falls silent as the stars begin to blink into view. Time isn't stopped, just sleeping. You kneel near the basin and dip your fingers into the water. It's cooler than you expect. Beneath the surface, tiny gears turn. Somewhere far away, a bell tower strikes 7. Here, nothing moves, and everything flows. You leave Toledo before dawn, the scent of midnight jasmine still clinging to your coat. The road ahead winds upward, following an old pilgrimage trail once meant for monks and mystics. But tonight, you're not walking toward faith. You're walking toward elevation. Your steps echo across stone bridges that arch over valleys, where mist clings like silken thread. The moon is high. In this alternate history, the Sierra Nevada mountains host a different kind of sanctuary, an observatory designed like a garden. It was built by an Andalusian noble who, after studying Persian irrigation and European astronomy, decided the sky deserved more than towers and telescopes. It deserved hospitality. So here it is, the garden of the celestial guest. You arrive just as the eastern horizon begins to glow pale blue. The gates creak open to reveal a high courtyard paved in interlocking tiles, forming constellations underfoot. Each tile emits a faint shimmer from flecks of crushed mica, catching the early light like dew on leaves. Real historical fact, the Alhambra, a Moorish palace in nearby Granada, features intricate courtyards that combine mathematics, water flow, and symbolic geometry. Scholars now suggest many of its patterns contain encoded astronomical references. The observatory garden extends that idea skyward. A series of low walls and aqueducts channel water through the pathways. Instead of domes, the astronomers here use reflective pools, designed to mirror specific constellations at certain times of year. Tonight, one is tuned to Orion, another to the Pleiades. You are offered saffron tea by a woman in robes dyed indigo and russet. She is one of the sky gardeners. Her job, she explains, is not to observe the heavens, but to prepare the garden for them, to make the stars feel welcome. You sit with her beside a curved reflecting basin. "We prune time like vines," she murmurs. "We irrigate ideas." A quirky detail. The star gardeners use trimmed cypress branches to brush away moonlight from certain reflective surfaces. Like carefully managing too much brightness. Too much light, she chuckles. And we forget how to see what's small. You walk through the garden in silence. Small braziers cast soft firelight across geometric trellises. Each corner features a bench engraved with dual-language inscriptions, Arabic and Old Spanish. You pause at one. It reads, "A garden grows in every night if you water it with wonder." Some historians still debate whether ancient observatories truly needed beauty to function, whether the gardens, pools, and tiles were practical or merely symbolic. But here, practicality and poetry are not rivals. You lie down at the garden's highest terrace. Your back against a warm stone. Your face to the sky. The stars ripple gently in the pool beside you. Your breath slows. Above you, the arc of the Milky Way curves perfectly between two cypress trees. No telescope, no magnification, just you, the air, the stars, and the quiet knowledge that this place, in this soft alternate strand of time, was built not just for science, but for awe. And tonight, the sky has accepted its invitation. You wake to the soft hush of morning fog. The garden observatory now bathed in pearlescent light. A heron walks the edges of the reflective pool where you saw Orion last night, its long legs slicing silent ripples across the star's reflection. The next part of your journey takes you east again, toward toward the old port of Constantinople, still called that here, where East and West have always danced across the Bosphorus. But you don't stay long. You board a skiff crewed by quiet monks and scholars. Sailing north along the Black Sea coast. The air grows colder, tinged with brine and pine. After 2 days of gliding over misty waters, you arrive at a secluded monastery tucked between cliffs and forest. This is where the scroll lives. Or rather, where it survived. The monks call it the Scroll of Shared Heavens, and in this softened strand of time, it was never destroyed in the Great Fire that consumed so many texts during one of Europe's countless purges of foreign ideas. A real historical fact, the Library of Constantinople suffered multiple burnings over the centuries, each time losing manuscripts from Persia, India, Egypt, and beyond. We can only guess at what was erased. But here, someone protected this scroll, hidden deep inside a stone wall, wrapped in oilcloth, behind rows of olive jars and cedar kindling. It contains a celestial diagram believed to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia. But it's been copied, annotated, and expanded across centuries. Persian script overlaps Korean notations. Arabic geometry shares space with Greek marginalia. You are led to a circular chamber beneath the monastery's bell tower. Cold stone surrounds you. A single candle is lit. The scroll is unwrapped and gently laid across a table made from a slice of petrified wood. The head monk, a gentle man with snow-white eyebrows and a voice like falling sand, recites a list of the cultures that contributed to the scroll. Babylonian, he says, then Ptolemaic, then Hindavi, then Syriac, then Joseon. You recognize parts of it, constellations reimagined not as gods or beasts, but as metaphors. The eye that watches the horizon, the path of returning light, the star that never asks. You trace one line with your finger. It loops around itself, forming a kind of knot that defies easy mapping. That, the monk says, is the constellation of doubt. It reminds us not everything needs to be solved. A quirky detail. There's a stain in the upper corner of the scroll, mulberry wine. Likely spilled during a copying session in the early 1400s. Instead of erasing it, the scribe drew tiny fish swimming through the purple blotch. Every mistake, the monk says, can become art. You ask why the scroll hasn't been shown more widely. He smiles. Some things grow best in shade. Some historians argue that scrolls like these were never shared because they threatened central authority, maps that didn't align with official worldviews, heavens that didn't revolve around the right people. But others believe they were simply too beautiful to risk exposure. You spend the night copying a portion of the scroll by hand, using reed pen and powdered ink mixed with rainwater. Your Korean companion helps translate a particularly dense section, a poetic speculation that the stars once sang to Earth in vibrations too slow for human ears. And when you finish, you don't feel triumph, you feel connection. As you roll up your copy, a whisper of the original passes into it, not just the image, but the spirit of long-past scribes who believed that mapping the heavens wasn't about control. It was about care. You leave the monastery in the first light of dawn, the scroll gently bundled in your satchel, the ink on your copied section still faintly scented with myrrh and pine ash. The monks waved you off with 2 fingers raised, not a blessing. Exactly, but a quiet gesture of continuity. Your journey leads you now to a place you never expected to go. The river border between 2 empires. Here lies the Bridge of 2 Shadows, a name given not by governments, but by wandering scholars who noticed how the midday sun casts one side of the bridge in the shadows of cypress trees, while the other side reflects the stark brightness of open steppe. The bridge spans no great divide, only a quiet stream, but symbolically, it stands between 2 ways of thinking, the rational and the poetic, the measured and the mythical. And you've been asked to mediate a meeting. On the far side, under the saffron-colored pavilion, a group of Armenian and Greek astronomers await. They've brought texts with them, thick bound volumes in marbled leather, some bearing diagrams of eclipses and planetary rotations that predate Galileo. On your side, seated beneath teal parasols stitched with lotus embroidery, are a team of Persian stargazers, one of whom has designed a new type of quadrant that accounts for lunar distortion over arid air. A real historical fact, the Islamic Golden Age's astronomical schools frequently corresponded with scholars from the Eastern Orthodox Church. particularly through translations in Antioch, Constantinople, and Alexandria, but many of these conversations were lost or never recorded. Not here. In this softened history, you sit in the middle of the bridge, the in-between, and lay out 3 documents: the scroll fragment from Gela, the calendar wheel from Florence, and a moon phase diagram from Istanbul. Drawn on indigo silk, the scholars circle you like moons around a center of gravity. Debate flutters like birdsong, never heeded. Always curious. Someone points out that the Armenian text refers to a celestial body not found in any Greek system. Another notes a Persian term for the star that travels wrong, perhaps Uranus? But it's the Korean notations that stir the greatest reaction. A Greek elder murmurs over the Hangul script, marveling at how phonetic it is. Like starlight made sound. He says, "You smile." A quirky detail. The bridge itself was designed by a mystic architect who believed everything in life should bend slightly. None of its lines are perfectly straight. The handrails curve. The flagstones ripple like waves. Some say walking across it realigns your thoughts, like setting a compass. As the day passes, the scholars sketch a hybrid chart, just like the one you helped create in Florence. Only this one is stranger, deeper. It doesn't map stars by brightness, but by emotion. Each constellation is now paired with a feeling: regret, wonder, patience, urgency, joy masked as silence. Some historians argue that emotion has no place in astronomy, but others suggest the heavens were humanity's first mirror, not for gods or measurements, but for our own longings. As the sun sinks lower, the bridge glows gold on both sides. The shadows merge, and for a moment, there is no border, just quiet agreement. You watch a student from each group walk forward and tie their diagrams together with red thread. No signatures, no declarations, just the act of linking, knowledge braided across belief. And as the stars begin to blink awake above the treetops, you find yourself whispering the line from the monastery scroll: "If the heavens move, then so must our understanding." You follow the river past the bridge, deeper into lands where maps fray and cartographers once wrote, "Here be clouds." The terrain flattens, then blossoms, and soon, you arrive at the last Persian garden in the west, or perhaps the first in the east. No one is certain anymore. It is not large, just 4 long paths dividing a square of fragrant grass, with a shallow pool at its heart. Cypress and almond trees line the borders, and their branches bend inward as if listening. The air here smells of crushed rose petals, warm stone, and something older, like time, barely disturbed. A gardener welcomes you without a word. He's barefoot, with a teal sash knotted loosely around his waist and a small bronze sickle hanging from his belt. He gestures toward the pool. You kneel beside it, and the reflection surprises you. Not of yourself, but of constellations you haven't yet seen, a map etched in light and wind. The stars in the water shimmer and rearrange. Vega slides left. Altair pulses faintly. Then, very slowly, an unfamiliar pattern takes shape, a constellation shaped like a garden gate. A real historical fact: in traditional Persian garden design, the quadripartite layout symbolized the 4 rivers of paradise. But some scholars argue these gardens also served as metaphors for the celestial order, a way of walking through the heavens. 1 footstep at a time. You walk the perimeter slowly, each turn aligning with the 4 cardinal directions. With each corner, a memory returns. The tower bells of Florence, the carved moons above Istanbul, the lion mosaic in Samarkand, the fox in Gela's scroll margins. Somewhere along the path, your guide joins you again, the same Korean scholar who once stood beneath the Venetian sky. He points to the reflection and says softly, "That's the garden in the Cheongsong Yolcha Banyajido. We carved it into stone, thinking it was the sky, but maybe it was always here." A quirky detail. In one shaded corner of the garden, an old astrolabe hangs from a peach tree like forgotten fruit. Children sometimes spin it like a toy, laughing as the rings clink together. You sit together on the stone bench beside the pool, letting silence take root. Above, the real stars emerge, not as mirrors, but as memories. You begin to trace the new constellation on parchment, the gate of returning. It doesn't match any known system, but it doesn't need to. Some historians still debate whether celestial knowledge moved west to east, or east to west. Others believe it spiraled forward, then backward. like the arms of a galaxy, reaching for itself across time. In this garden, none of that matters. Here, stargazing is not about navigation. It's about stillness, about letting the night press gently against your skin until the noise of your own thoughts fades. A nightingale begins to sing. Its notes echo in the pool. You close your eyes and breathe in the mingled scents of loam, jasmine, and ink, and you realize this is what the scholars in Florence, Istanbul, Samarkand, and even Hansung were searching for. Not an answer, a space. At dawn, mist rises gently over the fields beyond the garden walls, curling like whispered questions around your ankles as you begin walking east again. The grass glitters with dew, and birdsong drifts in from somewhere just ahead, slow, drowsy, as though even the robins feel the pull of reflection. Your steps are light now. The burden of inquiry has softened into something more like companionship. You're no longer just collecting knowledge, you're learning how to carry it. By midday, you arrive at a village built beside a wide bend in a pale river. Its name changes depending on whom you ask. Some call it the Place of Wells. Others call it the Mirror Hamlet. A few just shrug and say, it's where stars rest before traveling again. A real historical fact, throughout Central and East Asia, certain rural shrines once housed sky mirrors, polished bronze or silver discs used during solstice ceremonies to reflect both sunlight and starlight. They were believed to connect the observer with the order of heaven, briefly synchronizing mortal time with the divine. The village elder greets you with a bowl of barley tea and a curious question. Do you dream in lines or in circles? You smile, unsure of your answer. That evening, you are shown the Mirror Garden, a small circular glade hidden behind tall reeds. In its center is an obsidian disc embedded in the ground, nearly a meter across, ringed with a band of etched symbols, half Korean, half Arabic, with a smattering of forgotten scripts no one dares translate. When night falls, you're invited to look into the mirror. At first, all you see is yourself. Then the stars begin to form, first faint, then vivid, then rearrange. The constellations here do not match any scroll you've ever seen. They swirl in new configurations, not chaotic, but composed, like a language that only speaks when whispered. You spot familiar stars, Vega, Betelgeuse, Capella, but in unfamiliar groupings. It's like listening to a favorite song rearranged into a lullaby. A quiet debate stirs in your thoughts. Were our maps always incomplete? Or did we force stars into rigid shapes because we feared the ambiguity of the sky? Some scholars argue celestial systems were tools of empire, used to draw borders not only on Earth, but across heaven. Others believe they were simply comfort, bedtime stories etched in starlight. A quirky detail. As you sit beside the obsidian mirror, a child approaches carrying a lantern shaped like a rabbit. They offer you a sweet rice cake, shaped like the moon, for your journey. They whisper. You take it with thanks. Then watch as the lantern's glow reflects in the obsidian, creating a second moon beneath the first. 2 moons, one real, one remembered. The village elder joins you again. He touches the mirror gently and says, "This is not a place of answers. It is a place of alignment." You nod, tracing the edge of the mirror with your fingers. You do not ask what the symbols mean. You don't need to. Instead, you draw your own circle on a fresh piece of parchment. Around it, you write, not where the stars are, but how they feel. You sleep that night beneath the reeds, the obsidian disc hidden beneath a woven mat beside you. Crickets sing softly. A breeze hums low. Somewhere nearby, someone dreams of sky maps that do not yet exist. The road curls onward one final time, taking you deeper into the folds of mountains that rise and fall like waves turned to stone. Mist clings to the valleys, and the air begins to thin. With each breath, you feel lighter, as if you've already begun to lift off the ground. The final leg of your journey leads to a secluded monastery perched atop a ridge. It's a place of wind chimes and paper walls, of stillness measured not in minutes but in shadows. The monks here do not speak unless asked to, and even then, their words are soft as dust on silk. They welcome you not with ceremony, but with warmth, warm rice, warm hands, warm smiles. That evening, you are shown the monastery's most sacred chamber, a round room open to the sky, with walls covered in faded diagrams, stitched constellations, and mirrored tiles that catch the starlight and scatter it like water. In the center sits a spinning celestial globe, not made of brass or glass, but carved from wood, lacquered with the sap of local trees and marked with constellations in both Hangul and symbols borrowed from Persian and Greek charts. A real historical fact. Korean scholars of the late Joseon period began adopting elements of Western astronomical instruments, especially after exposure through Jesuit missionaries and Dutch maps. Even while maintaining their native celestial systems, you kneel before the globe and turn it slowly. One monk joins you and places a hand gently atop yours. Steadying it, he whispers, "You brought so much back. But what will you leave?" That question stays with you long after the globe stops spinning. Later, in a small side room, you lay out your scrolls, maps annotated from Florence, Istanbul, Samarkand, and Hansung, side by side. There is no single pattern that unifies them. No grand key, just echoes, rhymes, harmonies. Your guide, now your friend, sits beside you, drawing tiny notations in the corners of each scroll, small dots, like stars, connecting ideas instead of constellations. A debate still simmers among historians. Was the merging of Eastern and Western science a form of syncretic enlightenment, or a dilution of cultural uniqueness? Some argue knowledge should remain rooted in its origin. Others insist that wisdom grows best when allowed to migrate like wind-borne seeds. Here, it no longer matters. What matters is this: the sky has learned new names. A quirky detail. A monk gifts you a tiny carved fox, a playful nod to the imagined comet-tailed creature from the scrollmaker's village. Its eyes are painted with silver, and it glints when turned to the light. For luck, the monk says, and smiles. You return to the round chamber one last time, lying on your back as the stars rise overhead. They seem closer now, not because you've reached some peak, but because you've learned how to listen. And slowly, gently, it dawns on you. This was never a quest to explain the heavens. It was a way to remember that wonder doesn't need translation. That looking up can be a kind of prayer. That stars, for all their distance, are patient. And if you pay attention, they'll learn your name too. And so now, your journey is complete. The scrolls are packed, the ink is dry, and your boots rest near the woven mat by the doorway. Outside, the wind has quieted, even the crickets are still. The stars are out again, faint but sure, as they've always been, as they always will be. You close your eyes and breathe in the faint scent of rice paper, pine smoke, and mountain air. You can still feel the weight of the carved fox in your hand. Still hear the gentle hum of the globe as it turned beneath your fingers. Maybe, just maybe, a few of those stars overhead are new. Not newly born, no, but newly seen, newly understood, as if your gaze has added them to some silent ledger written across the dark. The night deepens. The sky softens. The questions, they can wait. For now, your thoughts float like lanterns on a quiet river, drifting slowly, gently, toward dreams. There are gardens still unseen, maps still unwritten, songs of the constellations waiting to be sung in yet another tongue. But for now, just rest. Let the world spin without you for a little while. Let the stars whisper their slow lullaby. And if you listen closely enough, you might just hear the sound of ink on parchment, of soft sandals in corridors, of foxes with comet tails leaping between galaxies. Sleep well, traveler. You've found your sky.